Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. I'm going to keep this pretty short, but I think you're going to love this episode with Jen. This week, something happened, and it really activated some of her attachment injuries and her wounding, and I felt so honored to be present for her. And in this episode, we don't talk an awful lot about content, what happened. We do talk about the process and what came up for Jen and how she felt really emotional and untethered, and that sense of wounding that happens where we feel like there's something wrong with us and are our needs and wants valid. And then moving into that place of, it's okay for me to have wants and needs, I'm okay. And what she did in the process to get from this very untethered place to feeling more grounded in herself. We talk about parts work. I just think it's a beautiful episode. And yeah, I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let's just get to it. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia.
It's been quite a week for you, hasn't it?
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for all of your love and support through it. Whew.
It was really easy being here for you. And, what I love is your willingness to be transparent about the process. We don't necessarily have to talk about content, but I just want to normalize what it's like when history comes up and it hits us. You've been there for me when it's happened. And so much of what I heard you say this week in the moment was, why am I so messed up? Who would want to be with me? Are you okay with me sharing these things?
Yeah, no, go for it. You can tell I feel better and I have some distance on it because if you asked me that when I was in it, I'd probably be crawling up a wall.
Yeah. And you said, I'm not this way with my clients. I have more insight. When we're in the thick of it, it just feels all consuming. And for me, it was so easy and such an honor that you trusted me to be present for you this week as a lot of stuff went on. So I wanted to talk about that and how we go from that place of where you were in this place of wounding, and I've been here too, where it feels like it's me, I'm so messed up, why am I so hard to be with, why does this go on for me, to recognizing that this happens when we have initially parents or caregivers who can't attune to us. So we learn to make our needs very small, who we are very small. We internalize that we're too much, we feel too much, we think too much, we need too much. And then with part of this process that you went through on the other side of it for right now is you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And you have a right to want people to show up for you in a way that feels respectful and honoring. And it's not about you. And I don't know if there's enough distance that we can talk about. How do you get from there to where you're at now? But any part of this process that you're comfortable talking about, because it was just beautiful to watch you in your rawness go through this.
Thank you for that reflection. It's funny, as I was listening to you speak, I had so many different thoughts, so many different ways in to talk about this. And a couple of, I have one little gremlin that's like, uh-oh, that feels a little bit vulnerable about talking about it. I have another one that wants to, just tell everybody how beautiful my parents are and take care of them, and even talk about more generally parenting practices, right? So parenting practices of the time, and even some of it now. I mean, in my work, I'm firmly in the kind of peaceful parenting, responsive parenting. What we know from the research now, we know we've come a long way from spanking as a form of discipline, which is supposed to be teaching, right? What do we learn?
Right.
And also just things like crying it out, stuff like that, and what that does to a young human's impression that it's okay to have needs and that it's safe to expect that those needs will get met.
Mm-hmm.
I love your reflection that it was easy to hold space with me, that it's something beautiful to see a human in process.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think we get enough of that.
Mm-mm.
And I don't think that we really understand. And even those of us who have studied it, there's still this like, yeah, but, there's still this
Yeah.
expectation that I think I don't know, whatever you want to call it, if you're healed, you somehow won't go through it. And I know
Right.
I've said many times myself, like, you can't therapy your way out of being human.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have these human systems. I am still uncertain how much content and detail I want to go into, although it's such a great story. It really is. But it's not about the content either. I had something that felt to me like just kind of threw me into the deep end
Mm-hmm.
of a lot of big feelings. As you know, you were really right there with me. And I guess one thing, he was so disorienting, whether we're thinking of it in parts language and there's just a part that got blended that was just so bewildered. And if we're going to talk about parenting for a moment, because that's kind of the crucible, right? Where a lot of this stuff, the patterns begin to get established in a very young being that doesn't have the full cognitive resources, right? And if you think about yourself as an adult and you spent, here I am, I'm going to be 49 in a couple of weeks. If I spent 12 or 18 years with people that had a lot of power, even as an adult with all of my adult brain and adult resources, it could definitely mess with me.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it was benevolent, it would still have such an influence. So think about that now with like children. This is why we want to protect children, right? This is why some countries don't allow advertising directly to children. I think this is why we've got millions of adults, and no offense to Disney here, but like totally in very deep emotional ways connected to that brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm getting off topic. Well, no, I'm not, but I'm getting away from my vulnerable spots by
I was noticing that.
intellectualizing. Yeah, thanks. I caught myself in that too. Oh gosh, Patricia, maybe I'm not as ready to talk about this as I thought I was. Give me just 1 second.
Can I take over for a minute while you think? Does that work?
Yes, please.
So
Mhm.
here's what I know has happened to me, and this feels like it may be a parallel process. Content may be different. But, my mom did the best that she could. Our parents do the best that they can unless they're evil and intentionally trying to raise children that are going to be unhappy, wounded people. I don't think that happens. But I had so many attachment injuries as a kid. And then what I often have done with my intimate relationships, whether it's with, my husband or with close girlfriends, is there's this expectation that they're going to be able to show up for me in a way that's going to heal my wounding. And oftentimes those attachment injuries get activated. I don't know if I want to say triggered, they get activated. And that can put me into such a young place, that young part of me that just wants to be loved and seen unconditionally, the way that a mother that's very attuned with their child can be. Child cries, mother's there. Child is hungry, child is wet, the mother is there. And the infant learns that the world is a safe place. And when we don't get that, there's this young part of us that is wanting people to show up for us in a way that soothes us and comforts us. And we often don't learn how to do that ourselves. And we've gotten these messages that we're too much. So then these injuries come up and we feel like we're wrong, we're bad, we shouldn't be having them. We feel vulnerable, we feel insecure, we feel untethered. And we look for other people to help either ground us or ground with us. But it can be very undoing because we've got this healing. And even when we've done all kinds of healing, we still can get activated.
Absolutely. Yes, all of that. That describes my beginning of the week.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I knew that we wanted to talk about today was, what do we do with that, right? How do we shift? How do we show up in those moments? I always go back to how we can't do this on ourselves. As much as I intellectualize and love to go and talk and geek out and go into theory and stuff, like that's not going to do it either. Like we have to really feel, and we do heal in relationship where we can have corrective emotional experiences. And that includes our relationship with ourself, right? Which when we're blended, we don't have. We just have that one, when we're activated or whatever word we want to use, right? IFS language, that would be there's just one part blended with you. So there's not enough space in there to have a relationship with it. It's just so taken over.
And to me, that would be like my kid is so up for me that, I want you to be my mommy. I want you to fix me. I want you, there's not a part of me that says, there's a part of me that wants you to fix me and make everything better. But I know that you can't do that. That's unblended. Blended is, you're either the good parent, you're the bad parent, you need to be here, you need to show up for me, I'm good, I'm bad, that there's no separation from it. I don't know if you would explain blended differently, but if people aren't familiar with that term, I just want them to be able to conceptualize it.
Yeah, it's kind of like this one part of you so completely takes over that any other part of you that can have a different perspective like goes to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I guess I want to talk about the importance of these mirrors, right? These mirrors often, talking about just that parenting philosophy, right? Like I think in earlier generations, the task wasn't who is this person and how can I let them support them in growing into who they are. It was something more akin to I'm responsible to building and molding this person to have behaviors, beliefs in a certain alignment with my behaviors, beliefs.
That make me feel good and competent as the parent, not about the child and the messiness.
And there's still some of that. Like, I mean, I carry the value of kindness and it drives me nuts when my kids are not being kind. But the broader thing is, who is this person and can I help them become themselves? Trying to accurately reflect this mirror back to them of who they are. So if you've got, a kid like me who just is kind of just very natural system, some of this maybe HSP conscientiousness, I tend just very naturally from a very young age to be very just kind of liberal, and wanting to understand all these different perspectives, really into, things being relative to each other as opposed to absolute in a conservative household. Oh yeah, then just throw in that I'm queer too, and that's not allowed. Right. So the mirrors that I got mirrored back to me, whom I guess maybe my parents wanted me to be versus who I am, were profoundly distorted. So when I'm up, when I'm activated, I can't get an accurate view of myself. It's very disorienting. And I called out all the stops this week. I mean, I don't know how many hours you put in with me. Right? But, and it was so great. Most of it was over polo. And that was such a blessing because then I could go back after I was calm and kind of watch it and actually see myself as like a young part that was really had me. And when you're in it, again, I can read about it. I can geek out about it. I can do this for other people. When I'm in it, like nothing except for like breathing and trying to hold steady. And that, at least I had the presence of mind not to project all of my stuff all over. So, I mean, there isn't nothing to all of those years of investment in this.
Yeah.
But I had you, I had my friend Tracy, I had my own therapist. Stacy had a coach I work with, Tiffany. Like I had a lot of support and a lot of different mirrors that were trying as hard as they can to be accurate. Because of course we all have bias, right? And we all have, this is the lens in which I see the world. And, but, and it's funny, even thinking about my own work as a therapist, as a counselor and a coach, sometimes I feel like when I'm doing my job at the highest level, my clients will feel like they've just kind of had a meeting with themselves with a really huge perspective that they're able to really see into themselves in a deeper way and with more spaciousness. All of this is to say, it's not easy.
It's not easy.
It's not a failure. It felt like it in the moment. I howled. I had to cancel a whole day of clients and basically spend the whole day howling. And where I ended up was very much, it was beautiful too, because I was able to get a very vivid inner experience of picking up that baby and just holding her close.
Yeah.
Instead of demanding that the world meet me. Because my vision was not clear. I couldn't see. Everything was getting filtered through this lens, this narrative of I'm too much. It's not okay for me to have wants and needs. I can't even tell in the moment the difference between, is this just a preference? Like it would be nice versus this desperate feeling. That's when a younger part is up. And it took time. It took a couple good nights sleep to integrate. And it took other people.
Well, you were willing to be in the feelings, in that place that feels untethered. You did a lot of writing. You took time off. You cried. You reached out and got support, which was very vulnerable for you. You did the stuff that you needed to do. And had you gone in, and if you're in a place where you do this, there's nothing wrong with it, but you could have gone into an intellectual place and just gone through kind of making rules about how to get through the week. And what would have happened is the next time that this situation came up, you probably would have been activated and then it would come up again because whatever we don't work on healing continues to come up for us. And that's not to say that you hadn't done healing up until now. You had. This was a new form, a new twist, and this happens to all of us. And I think we had this belief of, I've done therapy, I've done this, I've worked on my attachment injuries, that, why is this coming up again? And there's always new layers that come up, and it's not a bad thing.
Yes. I wish as a society we could move away from these ideas that we're never, that somehow it's wrong. And again, back to that reflection that I was on a journey. I love the hero's journey metaphor. Heroine journey metaphor would be. I was recently reading more of a feminist take on it too. So it's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. But being able to see it as a journey and into some dark places, but if you are willing to face it, you come through it and hopefully get to take some of the wisdom with you. And of course, it's spiral. It's not linear. So I'll hopefully it won't be next week that I'm calling you and all of that.
And if you are, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And if the conversation could shift to, yes, this is here. How do we take care of ourselves in it?
Right.
Instead of having all those layers of shame that it shouldn't be happening, so then I have to bury it.
Right.
Or, however we do that, I have to numb it. I have to eat it. I have to, like all the other, there is this other option of how to cope with it.
Right. And it is okay that if you need a little bit of a break and you want to escape into movies or you have something that's comforting to eat or you take a nap or whatever those things are, that those things are also okay, that, none of the ways that we cope are inherently good or bad. It's just, is it working for us and is it providing comfort or is it not working?
Yeah. And that was part of it. I think one of those polos to you, I was like, a couple choice words that I won't say on your podcast. And I sat down to eat dinner and hopefully watch a show that I couldn't get into.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when all the other stuff, because I couldn't distract myself in that moment in my distraction of choice.
Right. The app wasn't working for you to be able to watch what you had expected to watch. And so it's like, this is how I was going to take care of myself. And now what?
Yeah. Yeah. And now what was stepping back into the narrative, was stepping back into the story and getting it reactivated.
Right.
So I totally agree with what you say. There is no, it's really just, how's that working for you? We don't want to judge any coping. We want to appreciate the ways in which it's adaptive.
Right.
I work with teens. I myself was a kind of a handful as a teen. And, even looking at something like cutting, at how it can be adaptive, how it's an attempt to satisfy something that at its core is wholesome. That's why we use a trauma lens with, addiction, hopefully, right? Like, where is this wholesome core need that's trying to get met? And then, it's just, again, the coping yields things, right? How's that working for you? What are the pros and cons of that?
Right. I often think that in the moment when, and this is what I observed with you last night, is this activation and then this urgency to have to act or respond because you felt this pressure. And I've seen this before, that sometimes, I'm not saying this is you, but it can be really difficult for people to sit with discomfort for 24 hours and just see what happens. But we get this intensity and we just want to do something. And that can be really challenging. And I don't think that this fit for you in this situation, but I think for people just to learn to sit with that discomfort and not have to react, not have to respond. Really, it's a big thing. I remember when I went through recovery, when we got feedback, we were told to sit for 24 hours and not respond. Man, that was helpful. Difficult, but helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Stacy said that to me too last night. She's my therapist. And she was like, when you don't know what to do, it's best to do nothing. And that's so true. Like, let's just see how it unfolds, how we feel in 24 hours. So in IFS language, that gives that part a chance to unblend so we can have more perspective.
Right.
It is not easy. It is one of the tenets of like mindfulness, right? It is like sitting with our discomfort, recognizing that discomfort isn't dangerous. And again, just to stress, like, we don't have to do this alone. We alone have to walk our path. No one can walk it for us. And we have to do it. Like, we have to actually walk it. We can't read about taking a 100-mile journey. Like, that's my intellectualizer lesson. You have to actually do it. You have to actually feel your feelings, but you don't have to do that alone.
Right.
And there's many ways to do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist. A therapist is a great option, but it can be friends you trust, can be a coach.
That have the skill set to be able to hold the space.
Yes. And that's the other thing, like respecting that bandwidth. Like, thankfully you had the bandwidth for me.
Yeah.
If you didn't, that wouldn't mean that you didn't, care about me or want to be there for me. It just means you have your own life and whatever was going on for you.
Right. But that can activate more of your attachment injuries and that narrative of I'm too much and people can't be here for me. That's what comes up for me. And so having to hold space for that in the midst of feeling like you're in crisis and needing somebody to be there for you and then people can't, bumping up against those limitations, it can be hard.
Yep. Especially when you've got a young child part driving the bus. They say right, feelings are like children, right? We don't want them to drive the car, but we don't want to stuff them in the trunk either.
Right. Yeah. It's funny sometimes when during the week, as you were talking about getting comfort from other people, there's, one of my parts is like, but I want to be the only one, but I want to be the favorite. And I name that because
Patricia, you are a very important one.
I know I am. Thank you.
And I'm so thankful for you.
But I name that because I think that goes on for lots of people and it's not something that we voice
Absolutely.
because of that fear of like that's a young thing to say. And it happens even when I teach the online HSP course, because you and I did the videos together and people will say, I love when Jen said, I'm like, man, I love when Jen said.
I really want to join with you in that because I definitely have that same very human part.
Yeah.
And I think if we were all really able to be honest, we all do.
Yeah.
I think
I want to be the favorite. I want to be the best.
I want to be universally loved by everybody. Right? Because, the flip side of that is I'm not sure I'm lovable, right? That's me. That's for mine, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, do I matter? Am I important? But I think it's important to name these things because they go on. And obviously, you and I have done enough work that we're comfortable naming it. But I think when this comes up for people, it's like, how could I tell anybody about that? Or we often are around people that don't understand. And so they either say something that's really unhelpful or shaming, and then we feel even worse for naming it. So, yeah.
Right. Because we're not comfortable with how it makes us feel, right? Or they're not comfortable with how it makes them feel. I would love to revisit this maybe in a future episode if you'll have me back. Haha, wink, wink.
Of course.
Right? I know, right? There you go. Maybe with some more of the content details in kind of tossing it inside during our whole conversation here. I think I want to get the permission of the other people involved who are away on vacation. I have no idea because I didn't want to disturb their vacation because I've got tons of baggage, right? So, and we all do. That's part and parcel of being human. And it's okay, right? See how I'm trying to convince myself by being so emphatic about that?
Yeah. Well, there's this fun line and then we need to wrap up, with this podcast that I've shared about a lot of the bumps that have happened in my relationships. And it gets a little tricky about what can you share and what can't you share, because I want to share process with you, the listener. And it means that somebody else's privacy may be exposed or not exposed. And how is that for other people? So I totally get it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Even though this whole story has nothing to do with anybody else but your experience, but because it's always in relation to somebody else, how do we delicately handle that? And I've had that wondering of some of the people that I paddle with that listen to the podcast, if they share or don't share with me because they're afraid that I'm going to tell a story about them, even though I never tell things that are uncomfortable by anybody's name. But I have had that before. Maybe people just don't want to talk to me because they're afraid I'm going to talk about it on the podcast. I don't know.
Didn't I get you that keychain that was like about writing your next book? Keep talking. I was taking notes for mine.
Yep.
I mean, I think at the basis though, like I do have a really, although I can get snarky with parts, like I have a pretty compassionate base. And yeah, just to be super clear, nobody has done anything wrong here. We can get activated because it conforms to our narrative that we're telling ourselves that were formed very early in childhood without any kind of discernment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to wrap up. We're over time.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Hey again. I'm curious to know, what did you think of that? I love the authenticity and just the realness that Jen and I share. And my hope is that it's modeling to you what intimacy and relationships can look like, what it's like when we talk about our gremlins and things that are vulnerable, and how beautiful it is when you have people that you can show up for just raw and vulnerable. And from my perspective, how honored I felt. I have to tell you, when we got off the phone, I have some stuff going on. I'll probably talk about it in a future episode. But I just cried. And I'm like, why do I feel so messed up? we're always, well, maybe not everybody. It's not uncommon for us to be going through lots of things and just to let it be okay to be where we're at. A friend of mine today suggested that I start antidepressants because I've been irritable. I've been very irritable recently. And when Jen and I were talking, she's like, "You're just going through stuff. I'm here. I've gotcha." So, anyways, if any of the things that you've heard in this episode resonate with you, if you want to work with Jen, you can reach out to her at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. We're both here for you. We want to support you in growing and thriving as a highly sensitive person. We're all going to have wounding. The trash truck is outside. I hope you don't hear this. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.